And the most difficult thing is going to be the kind of stage management of this afternoon of my presentation, because I propose to talk as little as possible, but show you music which actually demonstrates and illustrates everything I think you've been talking about and are likely to talk about in the next 2 or 3 days. It's really important, in my view, that cultural diplomacy, when it comes to artists, we talk actually through our art. What we say, what I say as a musician, and as you heard, I'm a composer and musician, director of the Ukrainian Orchestra. Everything I want to say, I say through music. I don't speak particularly eloquently. Not my job. People have been doing that wonderfully this afternoon and very heartfelt. But what I want to do is actually show you some ways in which this country in particular, but this is part of a European project. We oddly enough have been funded for work in France and Portugal. Again, with, as you'll hear later, with migrant communities, with refugees, asylum seekers, which is part of what Grand Union does. And we put them all on stage, and you are going to see them. Only 5 miles from here, in the Hackney Empire, wonderful old-fashioned Victorian theatre in East London. East London is the heart of really cultural diversity in London. It's the home of immigration and has been for 500 years. I think immigration gives me my art, really, because I couldn't write and we couldn't have the culture of this country we have if we didn't have this extraordinary range of migrants. But we are in danger of not giving them their voice. And so what you'll hear on stage, see on stage in a minute, is, I don't know, 100 people, the most extraordinary range, including Somalia, incidentally, let alone Bangladesh and other parts of Africa, India, China, South America, the Caribbean. We have them all, and they all live in East London. They're all wonderful performers. Now, before we do this, right, well, I'll see how we go. I may have to adjust levels, and what I'm going to do is, as I say, speak as little as I can, and show you excerpts from a show that we did 6 months ago at the Hackney Empire, and go in little chunks, about 1.5 minutes each. So the stage managing bit is a bit of sort of stopping and starting. So if I have the eye of the technician, this is where I want you to start, and this is where I want you to pause, and then we'll go on. I'll just say a little before I'll let some water. Is there any water in here?
I get you water.
Thank you very much. So, The Isle is Full of Noises is my title, and we have these leaflets for you to take away afterwards. The Isle is Full of Noises, oddly enough, is a speech by Caliban in The Tempest. And Caliban, of course, was the maverick. He wasn't Prospero, the magician. But Caliban has this wonderful speech. Be not afeard, the isle is full of noises, sounds and sweet airs that give delight and hurt not. Sometimes 1,000 twangling instruments will hum about my ears. Now that seems to me to sum up what is wonderful about the music in this country, 1,000 twangling instruments from all over the world, which give delight and hurt not. Why are we so hung up about immigration? Why are we so hostile? Why don't we welcome people, or at least make good use of the people we have here and the culture that they bring with them, their experience of the world? So that is what, and the show, oddly enough, was not called The Isle is Full of Noises. That was a celebration we did afterwards. It was called Undreamed Shores, which is another Shakespearean quotation from The Winter's Tale, and an unhappy couple are advised, in the romantic context, not to seek undreamed shores, but undreamed shores, going to a land that you can't imagine. Does that not sum up the experience of any migrant the world over and centuries over? So I'm going to start with, here is the very first bit. What you'll see gradually is an extraordinary range of characters. The first, thank you very much. The first piece, the first section is called Strange Migration, and it introduces 3 of 4 of the singers that you're going to see later. So maybe can we have some lights down, maybe? It would be nice to take the house lights out. Anyway, would you like to start it, please? And is there any volume? A little higher than that. Quite a lot louder, please.
Just a minute.
Too sharp.
Just listen.
Sorry. Now, cut off a little bit soon, just to hang on a minute. Anyway, now that song comes, you won't hear it again in this version today, but it comes 4 times, and it introduces different episodes during the show. And you'll begin to get an idea of how this relates to real life as I go on. Migration also, I love myths and legends, and because they have a universality about them. And the Yoruba culture of West Africa is one of particular importance to me. We have African musicians, and there are 2 Yoruba chants in this piece. Here's the first one, and because Yoruba culture, the Orishas, Yemanya, who we'll see here later, Elegua, Ogun, and so on, migrated themselves as a result of the slave trade, of course, over the 400 or 500 years ago, to the southern parts of America, Brazil, the Cuba, Caribbean, and the southern United States. So I love Elegua. He's the man who's going to crop up quite a lot. He's the guardian of the crossroads who blesses your journeys. And here's the first journey. Let's go. Okay, fine. Now, I live in the city. You arrive in the city as a migrant, and it's likely that some gangmaster is going to put you to work on slave wages. This also show obviously refers to migration in England over many years, not just recently. So the next piece is 2 things together. An old Lancashire folk song called The Four Loom Weaver, which describes life in the factories in the Victorian age, in the 19th century. But it parallels it with Bangladesh today, and we all know what happened in Dhaka a year or 2 ago, and where cheap factories are now sited in the East. We don't have them in England anymore. We put them somewhere else in the world. And this is followed by another song about working on the production line of a car factory. We're in very gloomy, doomy area at the moment. Believe me, it's going to be celebratory later, but we're going to cheer up. So here is industrial life in England in the past and in Japan, perhaps in the present day. Sorry, we're not. You can see the whole thing is stretched. These people don't actually look as wide as that, but. And I don't know whether we can have a little fuller volume. You're not getting this full sensation of the sound. Is it possible, not louder, but perhaps a little bit more on the amp, and a little bit more bass, perhaps? Anyway, the sea is the other great image, obviously migration, and since Portugal is one of our partners in this project, there's a lot of Portuguese songs and Portuguese thread in it. And this next piece, as you can see on the screen, is Liana, who's a wonderful fado singer, and her husband, in fact, who plays Portuguese guitar. And this is quite simply called Carta ao Mar, a letter to the sea, how wonderful the sea is, in effect. The sea is greater than anything in the world. Here we go. This is a delicate song. Get a little bit up if you can. Now we stay with the sea for a minute, and there are dozens of lovely metaphors for migration, but this particular story really gripped me. I worked with a Chinese lyric writer for many years who was himself a victim, or his family. He wasn't a victim, his family was, of the Cultural Revolution. He actually had rather a good time, he told me one day, working on a collective farm as a teenager, but he didn't mind particularly the persecution. However, he is a dissident, and he's lived in London for many, many years. We came across this extraordinary story, which is absolutely true. In fact, it hit the Evening Standard a few months later, called Shanghai Crabs. And the story, quite simply, is that there is a delicacy in Shanghai, a crab, which lives in the river, but the river is so polluted that it can't actually survive. It's a rather ugly-looking creature, but it's a delicacy and sells for enormous prices. As a consequence, they have to flee the country. They grab onto boats. They go to all parts of the world, so these Shanghai crabs are now found as far away as South Africa, for example. But the place they particularly like living is on the River Thames between Limehouse Basin and Tower Bridge. Now, the only thing about them is that here they're not so highly prized. Now, you can make of this what you will, but these poor crabs come here expecting to make a living, being sold for enormous prices in sorry, my memory's going in the West End. But anyway, this is their story. And it's, again, excerpts from it. Part of it is set to an old Chinese folk song, in fact, and it's a kind of, you won't hear the words very clearly, but it's about food. So it's a kind of food song. And the Chinese crabs eventually, as you'll hear a couple of minutes later, do actually triumph in London. So here's Shanghai Crabs. And the sea, of course, still. Now, you see a couple of things. The clash of cultures is very important to me. The turning a Chinese folk song, very pentatonic scale, into jazz is one thing, and the pitting of two musicians from utterly different cultures against each other. Louise, in fact, is Australian, wonderful jazz flute player, with Ruijin on the Chinese flute. Now, we're going to meet the other Orisha. This is Yemanya, who's the spirit of the sea, who looks after fishermen. The singer in this case, so Yemanja's song is going to be really important. The singer in this case is Jacqueline Luanzo, who is an asylum seeker from the Congo. And she's a wonderful natural singer. You're going to hear her again in a more upbeat song in a minute. But so she, this is called the kind of the cultural diplomacy, social cohesion part of things is, we meet these people and they are so determined to make a life here that it's our job as musicians, as artists, to make sure that they have these opportunities. And a lot of these people are, and she had leave to remain, she's just about got her papers after 4 years, so we can now we employ her actually legitimately rather than brown envelopes under the counter. So here is Jacqueline and the choir singing Yemanja, set to an African rhythm, incidentally, a 12/8 rhythm, which is very common. Good. Now, what would Elegua be these days if he came? If he was surely he would be a British immigration officer, stopping people coming into the country. This next song is really quite simple. It's called Mr. Never Smile. Mr. Never Smile never smiles, never lets anybody in. And once again, it's set to the same, it's a reggae type song in fact, but it's set to the same Elegua chants as you heard about 20 minutes ago. Here's Mr. Never Smile.
Stay
We'll pause it there for a minute. Now, where's it going after this outburst of anger? It's going to be, how shall I sing the Lord's song in a strange land? But there are 3 songs, my own song in a strange land, are coming up, and you see how joyous they are. Jacqueline comes on first with a Congolese song, wonderfully plangent Turkish piece, and then our Croatian singer finishes this little sequence off. So here we go with, where's Tony Kofi, the wonderful saxophone player, going to take it? Okay. Now I'm going to do one more because it's particularly relevant to the point that was made earlier by the ladies now gone about Islam, or it relates to that. It's called Red Soil, and we live in a part of London, we're based in London, where there's an enormous Bangladeshi population. And obviously you can see quite a lot of the musicians and singers come from that part of the society. Fascinates me, over the years, written lots of pieces about Bangladesh, about the War of Independence, about, well, as you see earlier, about the factories and the poor, the way that the poor are treated, and the boat people too, if it comes to that. This particular piece, however, is a dialogue. You don't see much of the dialogue, it's been so cut, but it's called Red Soil. And it's a dialogue between an old man, who oddly enough sings in English, and a young man who paradoxically sings in Bengali. And the young man is saying, "Why do you go on about red soil, Dad? What does it mean to you? Why are you telling me this?" And of course, the upshot of it is, at the end, the red soil that he never told anybody. This is like First World War soldiers never talking about experience. The blood is in the soil from the wars. So it's finally revealed, this dialogue. However, why it's relevant to the conversation earlier is that it's based on a song called Lalon Ki Jat. And the wonderful bowel singer of the late 19th century, Lalon, this song is quite simply about, you scratch, it's like the thing from Shylock really, you scratch me, am I a Jew, am I a Christian? Lalon is saying, does it matter what my faith is? We are all equal. Lalon's actually a wonderful poet and writes versions of a lot of his things. However, this is the last piece I'm going to do, Red Soil. So that's not quite the end, we'll leave it there. But that's the drama of Undreamed Shores, and you can see all the elements that go into it. And just remember that pretty well all those performers are, many of them amateur, are from East London today. And that's what I do, that's what the Grand Union Orchestra has been doing for 30 years. That's our contribution. I hope it's a useful one to the dialogue, actually clothing it in music and art and culture.
I enjoyed. Thank you very much. Have a wait, just a couple of questions. Can I ask some questions for you? That was excellent. I enjoyed it, especially the Shanghai Crabs, which is especially. Please, anyone has a question, because these are very important. This is a cultural diplomacy as well. Through the music, through the art, they show what they feel. Please. Any question?
Yeah,
yes.
Of course.
Okay. Please, introduce yourself and say a question.
I'm Marina, I'm an intern at the RTD. I just have a question, because I think usually one associates cultural diplomacy as one nation and one nation's base, as it were, but here you're sort of, it's cultural diplomacy as a collective activity, many nations together. How important do you think that is? You mentioned it's important about immigration, migration. How important an aspect do you think it is that it's cultural diplomacy, many nations all together rather than one nation?
I think it's crucially important. And that is one nation. I mean, those are all British people. That's part of the point that I would make, and we lose sight of that really. But it's also, I think, it's essential. It's international, and as I say, this was a European-funded project as well. and hopefully that lesson is kind of spreading across Europe. I think it's interesting, the individual and the universal. I mean, each of those a lot of individual talents there, but it's collective as well. And I think that's another point of the one nation, many nations example.
Yes. Second, please introduce yourself and question.
My name is Iyad Mohammad Badmi. I'm from Pakistan. I would like to first of all appreciate your efforts very nicely. Music don't have any language and any geography. My question is that how we preserve all the globe, their music together. This is
How difficult? Sorry, I didn't quite understand it.
preserve all the
Right.
globe, all the world, their music together, and
I think I'm not an ethnomusicologist. I'm not a musicologist at all. Everything we do is by practice, and the musicians that I work with and have for many years bring that music, and so. While that's pretty well all my composition there with the traditional things, obviously in order to be able to work with African or Indian musicians, you need to learn about their own music. So we have a lot of workshops, in fact, and we have a completely separate strand of work, which is much more traditional than that, but the whole thing is unified. I think it's really important. The words should not be important. I mean, part of that's in different languages anyway. My point is that it has to be dramatized, and the music should tell the story. And if you've got on live on stage, of course, you've got the other things to help you. But I think there are many parts of the world where the other thing is that where music has to be preserved. I mean, it's and there's a balance to be held between preserving the very traditional cultures, which I agree with, though that's not, because I wouldn't be able to do what I do without it, although that's not my speciality. I'm not a WOMAD person. I'm a very sort of rough and ready East End person who puts things on stage at the Hackney Empire. Does that make sense?
Excellent, Tony, and please put your hands together for Tony Haynes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hello.